This is a treasured volume. It's an autobiography by Oral Roberts, a man that I found to be, in other exposures and in the reading of this book and in the following of his television broadcast, to be one most equitable and most sincerely trying to think no evil, as 1 Corinthians 13 would command us, in the words of Paul. I received this book as a gift from my son. He was 9 years old at the time, 1996, and the dedication or the note I got on the front page: to Dad, from Jordan Blair, December 25, 1996. May you enjoy this book's stories and miracles for years to come. And the thing I want to read to you folks is an event, or a sequence of events, starting in 1956, and it pertains to a planned crusade way overseas in Australia. And the subtitle of this section: Oral Roberts, Get Out of Australia. The year prior to Billy Graham's Australia Crusade, 1956, my 10,000-seat tent and equipment were shipped to Australia for crusades in Sydney and Melbourne, the two largest cities. The Sydney crusade went off well, with overflowing crowds, large numbers saved and healed. We even filmed it to show on our TV program back home in the States. Melbourne was a different situation. A longshoremen's strike was going on. Communists were among them, and the government was gravely concerned. Violence on the docks and in other places was becoming common. However, the first night in Melbourne, the tent was packed, and we were off to one of the finest efforts in the gospel of my entire ministry. Nothing could have been more perfect as to attendance and response to my preaching, success with the salvation of souls, and healings of the people. The hunger among them was very strong. No healing crusade of that magnitude had ever come to the land down under. I never met a lovelier people. On our second night, the tent was filled, and several thousand were standing around the edges. When I stepped on the platform to preach, there was a sudden wild and loud intrusion of the service by several hundred men from the longshoremen's strike. They filled the aisles, shouted obscenities, and several rushed on the stage and slapped me around. Police, who had been stationed in various places in and around the tent, stood with hands folded, handicapped by the lack of a law to bring order back into the service. We did not know that the Constitution of Australia had no law giving protection to churches. Wow! Rowdies could enter any church and cause disturbances without breaking any law. Somehow we got through the service. The third night was even worse. The tent was only half full, and again the gang rushed us, cursing the people, making fun of them, and coming on stage to spit on me and hit me in the face and chest and shoulders. Sponsoring pastors tried to restore order but failed. Once, when they hustled me off stage, they handed me a glass of water, only to find that beer had been poured into it. Bob DeWeese, who had been an Olympic swimmer as a youth and who was about 6'3", doubled up his fists and said, "Here I am, come and get me, you low-down, stinking cowards." No one took his dare. Meanwhile, the media were carrying the news of the invasion of the crusade by the hooligans, and did so in a way to aid and abet them, it seemed. The pastors gave names and addresses of people genuinely healed to the press, but the media refused to accept the people's testimonies. Oh, wow, wow. I had heard of yellow journalism, but I became its victim. Never had I been harassed like this by the newspapers and by radio announcers, been called such names, or been mocked for being a fraud. The point they aimed at was not my preaching, not my invitations for people to make decisions for Christ, which 1,000 did on the very first night, and not the careful way the chairman of the crusade received offerings for acceptance. They criticized the healing line. Had I not prayed for the healing of the people, I'm convinced there would have been no violent onslaughts on us. But neither would it have been the real me who had come with the same call of God as I had in the States and in other nations. Oral Roberts, Get Out of Australia. and such slogans filled the airways and newspapers. At first my mind was flooded with grief. Over and over the scriptures came to me, reminding me that violence most often came to Jesus and later to his followers after his ascension, when they prayed for the sick and did mighty healing miracles. Finally, on the fourth night, in an attempt to stop all the attacks on us, the sponsoring pastors asked one of the highest-ranking leaders of Melbourne, respected by all, to interrogate me publicly on the platform before I preached. The tent was nearly full, despite threats of further violence. The man was gracious but firm in questioning me before the audience as to my education, my station in life in America, my acceptance in other nations, and in particular the validity of healing as part of the Christian faith. He appeared most satisfied with my answers, but he was somewhat taken aback with my reply concerning healing as an integral part of Christianity. I gave chapter and verse of Christ's healing ministry, and of his command for all his disciples to go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, and these signs would follow them who believe. Demons would be cast out of people, the sick would be healed, and as his word was preached, he would confirm it with signs and miracles. The man turned to the crowd, much like Pilate did after interrogating Jesus before the cross, and practically echoed Pilate's words when he said of Jesus, "I find no fault in this man." He stated that he felt I was in Australia to do good, and that all violence should cease. The moment he finished saying that, the gang that had been waiting rushed the stage and spit on him, shaking him to the roots of his composure. Then they broke up the service. I was quickly led out to the car to be taken to the private residence where Evelyn and I were staying. Suddenly I was stopped and rushed in another direction. I said, "What's wrong?" They had seen the car in which I was to ride, and a part of the gang was rocking it for the final time to turn it over, thinking I was already in it. I broke loose to get there, for I knew Evelyn was in that car. "No, no," the pastor said. "When they see your wife in the car, they won't turn it over to injure or kill her. But if you get in, we don't know what they will do to you." They slipped me into another car, which sped away. Soon after I arrived at the residence of our friend, Evelyn came, white as a sheet, but with determination in her eyes. "Oh, Oral," she said, "I was scared to death. They were going to turn the car over. They saw you were not in the car, and they left. Honey, this can't go on any longer." We heard voices all around outside the house. Our friend with whom we were staying went out to check. The media had several reporters mixed in with some of the gang from the tent, who were going to remain there all night to get to me. He yelled at them, "Listen to me, men. I survived as a captain in World War II. I was almost killed several times during the war. I'm not afraid of any or of all of you. This is the first time in my life I've been ashamed to be called an Australian. Now get off my property and let this man of God sleep." All noises stopped as they left. Well, I have just a little more to read. Unknown to me, our insurance company was withdrawing the insurance on the big tent. The U.S. Embassy sent word it was not safe for me to remain, and the U.S. government could not protect me. My team, upon hearing this, did not awaken me. They got help to take down the tent and load it, along with the folding chairs and other equipment, into the 8 semi-trailers we used. They loaded everything on the ship, secured tickets on the airlines for Evelyn and me to leave on the earliest flight for the States, and waited for daybreak. One other thing my team and the sponsoring pastors did as we were flying home was to take out ads in the newspapers to explain what had gone on and why I had been forced to leave. A lack of law to protect religious freedom in Australia. A storm of controversy arose. Most churches did not know there was no such law. Most of the violence had been in the despised little Pentecostal churches, the leaders of which had been my sponsors in this, and I loved them dearly. The leading voice for religion in Australia, a prominent Presbyterian pastor, challenged the media on his daily broadcasts. A change began to come over the attitude of the people, and soon a new protection law was, in fact, passed. That made Billy Graham's campaign to me a year later all the more appreciated. He was filling an 80,000-seat soccer stadium nightly with perfect freedom, with or without healing. His telegram read something like this: "Oral, I know that you had a rather difficult time here, yet for your encouragement I have met many people who were blessed through your God-anointed ministry." When our plane reached American territory in Honolulu, The man of customs, having read of our troubles in Australia, put out his hand to shake ours. "Welcome home," he said. I confess, his welcome felt mighty good. What a story, eh? What a story. And what a coming together of two men of God. One, Roberts, Pentecostal. The other, Billy Graham, Baptist. Different ideas concerning the operation of the Holy Ghost, concerning whether or not there was a subsequent visitation after salvation in the arrival of the baptism of the Holy Ghost. But putting all that aside, these men worked and strived and enlightened for souls. And look how the whole thing got turned around. Wow, what a story. I never forgot it. It's the one part of the book I really, really remember. And now these days, you can go online. You can come to the Facebook page, I think it is, for son Richard Roberts, who continues the ministry in Oklahoma, and his wife, marvelous wife, Lindsay Roberts. Look them up, Facebook. You'll be delighted with what you hear them express to a happy and eager audience. Bye now.